How do you feel about the export expansion grants? Apparently you're quite resistant.
Well, the export expansion grant is good, but in Nigeria, what we're experiencing here is some inconsistencies. Inconsistency on the part of government, not giving it outrightly, and also because some agencies of government are beginning to give us some problems utilizing the grant.
All right, just tell us how the grant works and then technically why it's not very efficient for cocoa producers.
Well, the grant is meant to be some kind of incentive to assist agro-processing companies to be able to grow and export processed product to Europe and America instead of raw beans. The idea is that when the grant is given, companies that are into export can readily have enough money to cushion the effects of high cost of money and lack of infrastructure that we have around here. Once this is done, it will be possible for the companies to grow. It will be possible for them to buy more machines and increase their throughput. That is how it works.
All right, now the argument on the other side is that this should be a good thing, because if you're being encouraged to export value added, it means that you've got to think just beyond producing the cocoa bean and exporting the raw product, but coming up with an indigenous, made in Nigeria product that would sell for more value internationally. Why do you not see that part of the argument, or why is it not feasible right now?
Yeah, it is not visible because production cost is pretty high in Nigeria. Like I said, the idea is to encourage people to add value to raw beans, to raw products that comes out of Africa. When value is added, you are able to kind of give value to the product and therefore secure your pricing in the international market. You know, the volatility of price regime is removed in terms of quality problems when you add value.
Okay, let's just talk about Nigeria and the fact that you're the fourth largest cocoa producer in Africa, but it's really difficult for you to gain traction in the way in which the Ivory Coast or Cameroon is doing. What are the limitations?
The limitation is because the Nigerian cocoa industry is heavily deregulated. In countries like Cameroon, even Ghana, there's some level of control. Because of the deregulation, instead of being able to get people to go into manufacturing, multinationals come into Nigeria with money and buy up the raw beans, and therefore people cannot do well. People are not encouraged to be able to make the money. Again, this is like a collaboration between the multinationals and local buying agents, because it's not as if the farmers in Nigeria are enjoying the price increases that we are seeing. They are not enjoying it. The people suffering in the industry in Nigeria today are the farmers and the people that are adding value to the product by way of processing.
What is it that you would expect the federal government to do just to incentivize the small-scale farmer to take on more risk, and also, I suppose, to protect the small-scale farmer from these large commercial enterprises, these multinationals coming through?
I think it's for the government to just come to regulate the market, like it was in those days when we had the cocoa board in Nigeria. Government should just come in, regulate it, and then a fair trade practice will be in place. Practices for the farmers, what they're supposed to do, and of course, ready market for the product that they make in the farms. If government is able to do that, the factories in Nigeria that are increasing now will have goods to process, and at the same time, the market can be guaranteed for the farmers, thereby eliminating the local buying agents and the multinationals that just come in to raid all the cocoa we have around here.
All right, we've got a guest host. His name is Nyagaka Ngere, and I'm going to bring him into the conversation right now. Africa's got about 4 major producers in the form of the Ivory Coast, Ghana, Cameroon, and Nigeria. In the Ivory Coast, we know that supply has been affected by war, partition, and disinvestment because of the political climate. But even they've been able to recover FDI that we saw pre-2003. Nigeria seems to be having real problems. We're told it's regulatory issues. We're told it's an influx of multinational players into the local economy and small-scale farmers not being able to rise above it. Are there any things that they could do to try to improve the situation?
Yeah, look, I think a lot of this has to do with really idiosyncratic factors that are specific to one particular economy. You can't simply take what's happening in Ivory Coast and extrapolate that to for example, Nigeria. What I will say is that, you know, we're in a global commodity boom cycle.
Yes.
And I think that there is something to be said about evening out some of the bumps around pricing to ensure that there is a consistency of supply coming out of these four areas that you actually talked about as well. I think that there is an incentive short term, given the volatility in prices, for people to switch to other particular crops. But government does have a role here to play in stabilizing prices as well.
Okay, let's talk about the pricing of cocoa, because we know that prices are set to rise. They've already started rising. In other producers, the reason why they can't capitalize on a rise in cocoa price is because reforms haven't kicked in. In Nigeria, it's because the producers aren't really significant players on the market. How can that situation be reformed?
Well, I think it can change if government will come into the picture by ensuring that the producers in Nigeria are operating under a very good environment. The various problems that is seen in Nigeria, high cost of money and infrastructural problems are removed. Roads are fixed for to access the farms so that the farmers can easily have their goods pulled out of the after the farms to the gates. So these are things I believe government can do. We really need government to involve itself to be able to help, because the whole lot of cost to put in the infrastructure is something which will scare an investor or anybody that wants to go into farming and so on and so forth. So that's the reason. Government is really needed here to be able to grow the industry.
And just tell me, how well coordinated is the industry exclusively of government? I mean, you represent the cocoa processors, but in other countries, for instance, they band together into one marketing association, and consequently, when you're looking for a trade facility or funding internationally, you go into the negotiation as one umbrella organization.
Well, in Nigeria, what we have tried to do, the way the processors, is to ensure that we have a very strong association, and that is the Cocoa Processing Association of Nigeria, COPAN. We are trying to make sure that we are able to get these things. For example, we have been able to access the federal government, and the government seems to be paying attention to our plight, and we believe that this can be extended further if the international community get the signals that we have the ears of the government. Therefore, other things that can be done in form of invitation of direct investment into Nigeria can come, and also negotiations, buying of plants and machines, etc., and even the matter of pricing. Because in Nigeria, for example, because Nigeria did not sign the EU EPA agreement, our products are discounted in the international market, and that puts us at a disadvantage compared to other West African countries whose government have signed that agreement. So we still believe that what we are doing can get us to a new level in this country.
Okay, just talk to us about funding options that are available to you. We know that there's an agricultural development fund that's being sponsored by the central bank and managed by some of the tier 1 banks in Nigeria to try to channel money into the agricultural sector, but other ways also of raising money for the industry, something that is specific to cocoa producers. What are you doing about that?
Well, we know that there's some money that can be accessed through, apart from the 200 billion agric loan that has been made available for the industry and for agric generally. The Nexim, the Export Bank in Nigeria, is also trying to be of help to the industry. And then probably some other windows that is coming on through the CBN, which we are promised. We don't yet know about it. So the first thing is this: let us first and foremost be able to access very well the agric loan. I believe with the level of factories we have in Nigeria today, the agric loan will be able to meet our needs. And then if there's any other thing, probably the Nigerian banks can be made to support the cocoa processors in the short term. What the problem really now is getting long-term money to be able to sustain operations.
Okay, Nyagaka, I mean, let's find financing. It will support the manufacturers and effectively help us create a value chain with the suppliers, etc., is basically what we're hearing here. But going back to this issue of value added that the government is hankering after, is that they want to see value added. And in fact, to that extent, the CBN again has come up with funding for entrepreneurs, especially within the manufacturing sector, which encompasses cocoa processes. So there is a sense that the industry itself needs to pull itself by the bootstraps. Even if the government hasn't done enough, it's taken some strides.
Yeah, I think that may be largely true, but the fact of the matter is that agriculture as a sector is a very specific and sometimes very difficult sector to actually finance. The reality is that even outside of government, if you look globally, there are examples of banks that have had tremendous success in actually financing agriculture. So Rabobank out of the Netherlands, for instance, or the Agricultural Bank of China, for instance, which is the largest commercial bank in China. I think there are lessons and models to be learned in terms of how they've actually financed agriculture within the specific regions that can be applied to Africa.
Okay, and then finally you mentioned, Mr. Laoye, that the government also, in terms of at a multilateral level, hasn't signed a series of agreements that at least would give you entry into the EU market. But just recently, in August, there were reports, for instance, of a possible EU ban. I don't know how much has come from that, where the EU was really concerned about the quality of cocoa coming out of Nigeria, or the cocoa beans, the pesticides that were being used, the hydrocarbon jute bags that were being used. So there is a sense that something needs to be done to introduce best practices within the local Nigerian setup as well.
Yeah, that is the reason why I'm talking about regulating the market. Now, because the market was deregulated, you find out that there's no central control for things that are happening in the market. In the days of Cocoa Board, the farmers are guided as to what to do. The kind of chemicals to use, the processes to follow in making sure the cocoa is ready for export. But now, because it's deregulated, it's like to your tent, O Israel. Everybody is doing whatever they like. So we need government to put in policies. We need government to do that. For example, the Nigerian Produce Board, what are they doing? We want them to be much more effective, because the way they are now, they are largely just notional. They are not doing anything effective. The farmers are doing things on their own. Even though they have set up cooperatives that are trying to ensure good practices, yet you still find a situation whereby they cut corners. The products are not well processed. But we are in the processing industry now. On our part, we are trying to meet with these cooperatives, because we tell them about contaminants in the product. We are concerned about the chemicals, like the chemical issue that came up in August. We are making them to realize that very soon, if care is not taken, our cocoa will be banned and nobody will patronize. So they need to submit themselves to some kind of education. They need to submit themselves to some kind of practices which must be centrally controlled. The LCM is that we need government to assist us to do all those things, because the market has been like that for a long time. If control is put, if there's a legislation, everybody will fall in line.